Welcome to Business Beyond the Mic, where we join Carli Van Heerden, CEO and founder of We Edit Podcasts. Together, let's uncover the art of podcasting.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. I'm your host, Carli Van Heerden. Today on the show, we welcome Laurie Palau. Laurie is the author of the book Hot Mess, a practical guide to getting organized, and the host of the popular weekly podcast This Organized Life with over 3 million downloads. She's also the founder of Simply Be Organized, a lifestyle company helping people live simply and work smarter. Her advice has been featured in national publications including Real Simple, Better Homes and Gardens, and the New York Times. Laurie speaks, teaches, and writes on the topics of clutter, the Enneagram, and women's entrepreneurship. During our conversation, we jump right into Laurie's best advice for staying organized as a podcaster. Everything from scheduling your guests to making sure that you have all of their information gathered in one place. Laurie also shares her advice on getting started on your monetization journey and the biggest lesson of letting go of expectations and what to do when you hit the inevitable download plateau. Now, without further ado, here's Laurie. Laurie, welcome to Business Beyond the Mic. It's so great to have you on the show today.
It's so fun to be here. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was saying beforehand, I don't want to miss anything that you have to share with listeners because you have so many incredible episodes out already. You've been doing this for a long time. You've been in the trenches. So yeah, I'm sure we're going to get into everything that you can share. And I know that your brain is super organized. So that's what we need as well as podcasters. But before we start, why don't you kick us off and just tell us a bit more about yourself, your business, your brand, and of course, your podcast.
Sure. So, again, Laurie Palau, my company is called Simply Be Organized, and it started as a professional organizing company where I would go in, and I guess my core demographic was sort of like busy moms, if you're trying to picture, because there's such a spectrum of people. So I didn't really specialize in kind of like move management and downsizing or hoarders or any of the extreme stuff. It was more like, I'm just a busy person, and you don't even have to be a mom. It just could be a busy professional. And I don't have the strategies of like, how do you do things? What's a good system? What's a good way to do them? Or I'm just overwhelmed with stuff. And I just need somebody to kind of give me a roadmap to walk me through it. And again, my approach is very like hands-on kind of common sense approach. And my goal is really to help you reclaim more time and space in your life, whether that's personally or professionally. And so I was working one-on-one with clients, started writing, blogging, and then in 2017, I launched a podcast because a friend of mine who is in broadcasting was like, you should start a podcast. I had no idea about podcasting at the time. I barely listened to podcasting. Again, podcasting wasn't new, but it certainly wasn't the animal that it is today. And she's like, I have a producer that can help you with the technical side of things. Cause I was like, I don't know how to do any of that technical stuff. So from the get-go, I said, I'm outsourcing that. But content, I've got tons of content. I've been blogging for years. I had tons of, practical things that I could share with people. And I just looked at this as another modality, not realizing fast forward that this would become a core integral part of my business. I was just looking at it as like, oh, it's like an audio blog, which is what my mentality was. And for some people, it is just an audio or video marketing tool, and that's totally fine. And for some people, it's a hobby. And for me, it evolved pretty organically into its own entity of the business. So the podcast is called This Organized Life. This, not dis. People always say, is it disorganized? No, this organized life. And it's really teaching people systems and strategies in all aspects of your life. And I just love it. And that's kind of what I do. I'm a mom to 2 grown-ish kids, I say. They're in their early 20s. So I've been through the trenches of raising kids, and now I'm sort of on the back 9 of that. And so a lot of the stuff that I talk about is relating to all of the struggles as well as the wonderful things that come along with juggling work, household life, and all the things.
Yeah. And it's incredible just to see like the way that your brain works. Cause I was saying before, like some people just have that knack for organizing and like knowing, okay, do it like this, be like this. And I was listening to some of your episodes, even like your tip ones, and you were talking about just simply like taking your clothes off a hanger and like, what do you do with your hanger? And you don't like, everybody doesn't always think about those things. And the same thing rings true in your business, in your podcast. It can be little things that you don't think about that it's like, that should be put back in my closet. Like, so speaking like that, right? It's like that part of my system is not going back in my closet and it's just laying out there. So yeah, I can just totally see how you would, move that into the podcast sphere. But yeah, you have such a natural voice for podcasting too. And I feel like with your history of blogging and everything, it was a natural transition. But was there anything that held you back from starting a podcast that you would have thought about?
Well, definitely, like I said, the technical side, if I didn't have somebody that was basically spoon-fed to me, here's somebody that could do that, I, for 1,000% would not have done it, because it was really, for me, it was what's your bandwidth to do something? You're bringing something on. And I talk about this just in general about our time, our calendars. I call it calendar clutter, but our time is like a closet that gets filled. And when you're constantly adding new things, it's like adding a new piece of clothing into your closet. And so me adding podcasting into my already busy schedule of professionally and personally was just another thing. And so if you're not removing something, it just gets more and more filled until it's, bursting at the seams. That's kind of the analogy that I try to make. And so for me, it was a blessing to be able to know that I have somebody else that's taking care of the parts that I'm not good at, and knowing that these are the parts that I enjoy and these are the parts that I'm good at. So for anybody that's listening out there, I would say, think about about podcasting do you want to do? You don't have to do all of the things. There are ways that you can incorporate other pieces. I think if you're going to put a show out there, especially in a very saturated market, because I look at where I started in 2017 to where we are in 2024, the evolution of podcasting has just even grown exponentially in that 7 years that I've been doing it. You want to put out quality show. You really want to do a quality show. So think about how can I do the best show that I can do, whatever that looks like for you. That's really kind of one of my biggest tips to anybody that says, what should I know about or, think about when I'm starting a podcast.
Yeah. And there's so many parallels with that in your life, in your business. It's like, you don't have to do everything in every aspect of your life. Choose what you're good at, outsource the rest, and make it, more. And like you said, give yourself that bandwidth, because it is a long game. I mean, you are over 300 episodes in, right? And it takes time, it takes effort. And how do you even begin to think about getting there? I mean, I'm probably, 30 episodes in. It's a long road to get to there. But what's been your biggest, something that helps you keep going and, stay consistent in doing what you're doing as a podcaster?
Well, I think you just hit the nail right on the head. I think the key word is consistency. And that's with anything. And again, this can translate way beyond the podcast, Mike. This can go into any aspect of your life. It sounds cliche, and I didn't coin this, but it's about doing a little bit, whether it's every day or every week, whatever it is, it's that consistency. And podcasting's weird in the sense that you don't always get that immediate feedback. You're talking to the mic, maybe with a guest, and you're having a conversation, and you can look at your downloads and you can look at things like that, but you're not truly always getting that real-time feedback of, is this resonating with somebody? And yes, that's great. And that's why, as a podcaster, it really is great to hear feedback from your listeners through reviews and ratings and all that, because you do want to make sure that you're on the right track. But it can also be very isolating, because you're like, is what I'm doing even, is anybody listening? Is this even kind of out there for anybody? And so that part is really trying to look at where the metrics are and connect with people wherever that is, whether that's through your email list, whether that's through social media, whether that's through ratings and reviews, but trying to get that to say, hey, look, I even see trend lines of my downloads are going up or I think trying to figure out how can I make sure that this is even, something that people want to be listening to, because it can be a little, it's like weird if you're not in it. I don't know how else to say it.
No, you're totally true. I mean, what you're saying is true, because it can be isolating because you're talking to something that's like not a tangible audience, right? You're not sitting in front of a crowd of people talking to them and you're hearing them say yes or ask questions or things. So you're kind of just rolling with it and trying to say, okay, maybe that hit home, maybe not. And if you're not interacting with the listeners, how will you know, right? And it can be super isolating. And I think another piece of advice, for people not to forget about, is you don't always just have to find community with your listeners, but there's a ton of podcasters out there in the same boat as you, trying to do the same things, and you have similar goals. So find communities where you can chat to other people. And I mean, even if you get stuck on trying to find a guest, if you go into these groups of amazing podcasters, you can be like, hey, help me out. I need my first guest, because it can be intimidating to find that first guest, especially if you haven't launched yet. But yeah, I went back into your old archives and saw you started with solo episodes, right? Or did you start out? Yes, you did. And how did you make that switch from, okay, I'm going to do solo? What was the thought process behind that to having guests on?
Okay. So absolutely love this question, and feel free to stop me if I get too wordy or, go too deep in the weeds. So there was a very strategic approach when I started my show. Like I said, it was a way for me. It was going to be essentially another marketing tool. I wasn't at the time at all considering monetizing it directly. It was very early on. It was, I'm going to do another modality to reach people. So I had the blog. I was doing in-person speaking and I was writing, I was writing my book, but I was like, you know what? I want to reach people broader, and not everybody wants to read a blog. So I'm basically going to take my blog on the road and turn it into a podcast. And so because of that, I had all this content that I was able to just turn into podcast episodes. So that was it. And I also was initially starting it sort of as an experiment. Let me see if I even like this. Let me see how much time it's taking. It was a little bit of a financial investment because, again, I was paying a producer, and at the time he was very reasonable. So it wasn't a huge investment, but it still nonetheless was a financial investment. Plus it was more time. And I did have some prep that I needed to do. And so I kind of just set a very kind of low bar for myself. I knew I wanted to be quality, but I was like, you know what? I don't want to add all the moving parts of scheduling a guest. Like we were talking about, there's all the details, the devil's in the details, and that's all about organizing, right? So I started off with these solo episodes. They were no more than 20 minutes long. And my whole thought process was, again, my target market was busy moms. Busy moms are probably in the car driving to soccer practice or dance or wherever you are. And this is an episode that you could quick get a little nugget in while you're on the road. That was kind of my thought. And then I started actually getting feedback from people because I was shocked. I thought nobody's going to listen to the show. And I don't know how the timing was right, whatever. My SEO was right. And I went to Apple's New and Noteworthy. So I got a lot of traction. And about 6 months in, I think it was, I'm not exactly sure, I started getting reviews and people were saying, I love this show. I wish it were longer. So I started taking cues from my audience. And at that point, I also started having some wheels turning of going, I really enjoy this. I like this. It doesn't seem weird. And I think I could add another dimension by bringing in guests. There was also, and I'm not going to lie, I'll be super transparent about it. There was also this strategy of if I bring on a guest that is bringing value to my listener, it's also a way for me to expand my reach because then hopefully the guest is going to share the episode. So now people organically that wouldn't maybe normally listen to my show, once they share it, now I'm going to get in front of this other group of people. So there was this strategic component to doing it. So that's how I started bringing in guests. And at the very beginning, it was all people that I knew, either personally or professionally, people that I knew that had some alignment with organization, whether it was a productivity expert, whether it was an interior designer, whatever it was. I had friends who were realtors. And so I brought in people that I knew. So it made it very easy.
And that's a great tip because I think it takes away that like initial, like, how am I going to find a guest? Who am I going to ask? Ask the people that you know in your industry that you know you're going to have these organic conversations with, because that also makes it way better in the terms of like the value of the content that you're providing. It's not super scripted. It's just a natural flow of something that you've already been talking about on your blog or wherever you're writing or doing things in your business. So yeah, it's a great way to line that up. And I think, yeah, like you said before, the main thing that people get tripped up on obviously is, getting that organization of scheduling a guest. And I mean, there's nothing worse than scheduling somebody. And I mean, time zones is a factor, and you're sitting there and then you're like, oh my gosh, I have the wrong time zone. Someone's emailing you. Do you have the right link? You know, it happens. It happens every time. So what are your tips for people starting out with guest interviews to stay organized? Because that is something that we need as podcasters for sure.
Love it. Okay. And again, I learned it all kind of like all the hard way is especially if you're going to be doing guests, is have some sort of scheduling link. So some sort of, now, again, I don't get paid for any of this. I know popular one is Calendly. I know you use Calendly. I personally use Acuity. I love Acuity because, and again, I'm not a paid sponsor for Acuity. The reason why I love them is because it allows me to attach intake forms. And so you can have the scheduling app, and I'm not sure, Calendly may be able to, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I know at one point they didn't. They may have upgraded. But with Acuity, I'm able to send a schedule. So first of all, you avoid the back and forth of what time's good for you, what time's good for you. Oh, is this time's good for you? It avoids all that. You're able to send a link. Here's my booking link. You find a time that's good for you. So that's at the bare minimum, the one of the most streamlined. You're saving time on that. The second thing is with Acuity, and again, maybe this might be for Calendly as well, you can attach an intake form. So all the information that you want to include in your show notes, because if you're going to be having the show, you're going to want to have the show notes that you can then post in your apps as well as on your website, all the things. So I used to go back and forth. Can you send me your bio? Can you send me your headshot? Did I get the bio? Did I get the headshot? What are some things that you want me to know? What's your website? Like all these back and forths that I used to then, I'll say manually, either text or email my guests. And it was all this back and forth. So by adding a intake form, you're able to have everything in one place, which not only makes it easier for the guest, but it helps with the ease of retrieval. And for me as an organizer, that's my biggest tip that I teach everybody is it's about how quickly can you find the information or the stuff, the thing, when you need it. And so I know when I'm going to create my show notes or I'm going to pass it off to my producer to do stuff, I can immediately just go to that client record and all of that information is there. So tip number one, if you're going to bring on guests, is streamline your scheduling through an app.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, like you said, avoids so much of that email inbox clutter. It avoids missing time zones. And you have all the information, because I've done that before in the beginning, having to ask people for their headshots, for their bio, and then maybe they send the bio and then it's like, okay, but where's the headshot? So now you're emailing again. So it's those little time wasters that get you in the end, and you're almost just doing way more work than you should. So yeah, 100% agree with you there. It's been a life changer to be able to gather that information without necessarily needing to ask for it the whole time. So yeah, totally. And I think, but you get like little surprises when it comes to like, once you've got this organized and now you found your system and your flow and things. So now you can focus on creating valuable content, or like, what are you going to do next? Are you going to team up with another podcaster? There's so many things that you can do. Once you've got your flow and now you're in the game and you've launched and, you've got your flow. And But what other type of things have you found was surprising once you've launched your podcast and now you've got that in hand with your blog, with your business? Is there anything else that was a surprising benefit from having the podcast as well?
I really love learning from my guests. I find that not only are they bringing their own area of expertise to my audience, but I love the benefits that I get from sitting down with thought leaders and experts in their own field, or just somebody that's coming from a shared like life experience that I just might not otherwise have that direct personal connection with. So I love that kind of intangible that comes from podcasting. And having those organic conversations is really, because I think that's what it should be. It should really be a conversation to be able to have that dialogue, and always keeping your audience in mind though, right? So like there are people that I've brought on that I'm like, oh, I'm personally a super fan, but knowing that this person has to have some sort of alignment with what my messaging is for my people. I think is just, for me, one of the personal kind of perks and benefits of being able to do this for a living.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you never know who you're going to meet or what you're going to have in common, or, you know, next time you see each other at like a conference or something, and it's like, now you have that relationship, you've, had the surprising connection. So yeah, it opens up your world and just makes it so much more enjoyable to kind of be part of this podcasting sphere of things. But yeah, I know. And we chatted earlier too, like about knowing when things resonate with your audience and, finding ways to look at your metrics and things. So what did you focus on in the beginning, and how did your mindset shift now that reached however many million downloads, and how's that impacted the way that you podcast?
Yeah, again, it was really like an ignorance is bliss, because I didn't know a lot about the podcasting space. So I didn't know what was a good amount of downloads or bad about it. Like, not that there's good or bad, but I didn't have any sort of a benchmark. So I just knew I want to trend upwards, right? Like wherever you are, wherever you start, whether you start with 5 downloads or 500 downloads, the goal is you want those trend lines to go up. And so for me, at the beginning, I was looking at those numbers to see, but as I started becoming more strategic and offering other things like value add as a service provider, adding opt-ins, like, okay, in my world, for example, so I'm an organizer. So I talk about different organizing strategies. Well, right now I'm promoting a spring closet checklist or a spring organizing checklist. So I'll promote that on the show, in whether it's through like a host read ad or just organically in conversation. I'll include that link in the show notes. And then all of a sudden I'll start to see all these hundreds of people that are now downloading and opting into my email list. So even if they're not leaving a review, even if I'm not having that direct connection, if they're not emailing me or reaching out, I'm seeing that I'm having that metric by going, oh, well, but my email list is growing. And for some people, that's social media. And again, there's this misconception or this false narrative, I think, that we tell ourselves that like our people are going to be everywhere we are. Maybe that's just me, but they're not. There are some people that listen to my show and are not big on social media. So they're not following along on social media. There are other people that subscribe to my email list that don't even listen to my show, but they get an email about it. So maybe there's an episode that resonates with them. Maybe they're not big podcast junkies like I am, but maybe I have a guest or a topic that interests them. So maybe they'll hop into my show. So you want to reach your audience, whatever you do, in all those places. So that could be social media, that could be email, that could be a membership. It could be wherever that is, as well as the podcast. And the podcast should just be a conduit to all of the other things that you do.
Yes, I love that. It's a conduit to all of the things that you do. It's just like another gateway, something that you have to lead people to the real stuff, whatever you have to offer on top of your podcast, obviously too. But Yeah, I love how you put that. And I think in the same way, how did you decide now, okay, this is the time where I'm going to go from doing just all these interviews and things. Now I'm going to add in a second episode, of Back to the Solo. Walk us through that thought process, because I find it so intriguing to like, how do you decide? When do you decide to do this? And I mean, sometimes I even stop and try to ask myself or somebody permission, like, am I allowed to make a solo episode? And it's like, of course you are, but yeah, it's interesting. So just walk us through that process of how you made those decisions.
Okay, so I'll give you guys my story of the evolution of the second drop. And just for what Carli's talking about is we've always, since the dawn of time, Thursdays were our drop day. Yeah. And whether I was doing a solo episode, whether I was having a guest on, it was always that. And like I said, the show had grown in the duration, right? It started as these 20-minute episodes, and then it kind of crept up to the 1 hour. Now I feel like we're trending down a little bit because I feel like the industry people want quicker. But anyway, we're in that longer form episode. And I was at a podcasting conference like 2 years ago. I was at Podcast Movement, which is a great podcasting conference. Again, not paid by them at all, but great podcast content for anybody that's in the podcasting space. And I was there and I went to a breakout session and these two women were talking and they were talking about hitting that plateau of downloads. And I had sort of noticed that as well. Like I had been doing my show for several years and I was seeing each week, each month, the numbers grow. And then I finally hit this point where they kind of were plateauing and I was like, what's happening? Like, I'm not sure. They weren't necessarily going down, but I wasn't experiencing that growth. And they were talking about just that happens in podcasting. And one of the ways that and I was really getting into monetization at that point. So I was looking at my podcast through a different lens also. I was like, okay, how can I bring value? How can I attract advertisers, things of that nature? So I was already kind of thinking a little bit more business minded about the show. And they said, the more episodes you put out, the more impressions you could get, the more downloads, whatnot. So even adding a second episode, even if it's a shorter form episode, is a great way to increase your download numbers because it's hard to accumulate a new subscriber, but it is a lot easier to have somebody who's already a subscriber who's engaged and likes your content to go, oh yeah, I'll listen to something else you do, which was a light bulb moment for me because I know this in business, right? It's the acquisition of a new client is so much harder than the retention of an existing client. So I was like, and I'll be completely transparent. Again, I have a team that supports me. So I'm not doing all of the heavy lifting. I'm still doing all the content creation. I still have to carve out my time to record and all that, but I do have a team that helps me on the back end. So I said, well, I don't think I have enough content or mental bandwidth or physical bandwidth to do a whole separate full show. So what if I were to just do a quick tip of the week? Because I think especially in the organizing space, it aligned really organically with what we do. It's like sometimes you just need that one minutia, like make your bed, like something, just a reminder of something very, very small. Doesn't have to be complex. And I think that's the thing sometimes we get in our heads. So I said, well, let's test this tip of the week and we'll do a second drop. And people loved it. And it was and what I love about it from an operational standpoint is because they are short episodes, I can batch a month at a time. Like I will, from an organization standpoint, I'll say, okay, I'm going to record the tip of the week for the coming month. And I'll sit there and knowing that they're only like 10-minute episodes, I can bang out 4 or 5 of them at one sitting without getting, fried. So I do that. And then it allows me to be more efficient with my time. And then we can just drop them. And it's bringing added value to the listener and increasing our overall download numbers.
Yeah. It's like everything all wrapped into one for, the business of your podcast.
Yeah, for sure.
And now that we have our business minds intact here, What was your strategy when it actually came to the point of, okay, now it's time to monetize. This is what I'm going to do.
Again, I'm a go-getter. I'm a little scrappy if you haven't figured that out. And so I'm just not afraid to take some risks, right? I don't deal a ton. I mean, I guess everybody deals with imposter syndrome, but I'm kind of just like, oh, how bad can it be? So I decided early on, once I decided I was serious about this, I was going to reach out to brands directly. There's so many ways now that even new podcasters can monetize their show through programmatic ads. And for anybody that's listening, those programmatic ads are like basically the commercial ads, not the host read ads that you hear. When I first started, like that was only reserved for like if you had a really, really big show. Like I couldn't just come in here and all of a sudden start monetizing my show. And so for me, I just put together like a pitch one sheet, almost like a media kit that included, a little bit of a quick short bio, who my demographic was, what my downloads were, kind of where my handles were, or little things that brands would want to know and why I thought they'd be a good fit. And I would pitch them to sponsor my show. And that was how I started initially going out to monetize. I didn't know anything about CPMs or impressions. It was literally, I have a show that talks about organization and you're a company that provides a product or service in that space. Do you want to advertise on our show? And that was really it. And sometimes I would hear crickets. Sometimes they would say no. And sometimes they would say, yeah. And again, the beauty of being an independent podcaster is depending on what your interest is and what your scope and your bandwidth is, you can get super creative. You could say, I'll give you some social media posts. I can have you be a guest on my show. We could do a dedicated email. So you can add all these different added value. And that was how I went about monetizing. And now I work and I also have, an agency that helps fill stuff. But for people starting out, I think that's the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah. And it's a nice reminder that it doesn't have to be the classic, you want to put an ad in my show. It can be other value add things, like you said, a spot as a guest or something in the email newsletter. So just like you said, be creative and think outside the box when it comes to these sponsorship types of things and see where that gets you, because maybe it fits better with that business's thought process or aligns better with what they want to do, rather than just a simple ad on the show. So yeah, nice to be creative. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Laurie, it's been really so awesome just to pick your brain about all these incredible things that you've done. And I know I've been digging into all of your little changes and everything that you've, adapted and modified. But it's so great to capture those stories and just let our listeners know, it doesn't have to be one road for everybody. It's totally unique. You go out there and you make your way, which is, it's just encouraging for everyone starting out, or even those hitting that plateau, because it's real. It happens and other people have gone through it too. So implement what you can and put it into your own journey, and it can make all the difference. But now I wanted to jump into some fun questions, just the last quick fire questions. So whatever pops to mind, you hit us with it.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
So first one, how has podcasting changed the way you do business or life?
I think I just have opened up my perspective to new things. You get caught up in your own head. And I think just podcasting in general, whether it's as a consumer of listening to other people's podcasts, as well as sitting and chatting with people on my own show, I think I've just really evolved, like as a person, not in business, I just personally, to just have a broader like acceptance and tolerance of just people in general.
Wow. That's amazing. Great. Now, what is a non-negotiable when it comes to your podcast?
Audio quality. Because I know, and it still surprises me to this day when people watch my show, because I'm on YouTube as a platform, but I don't have like fancy camera setup. So I mean, I was born out of an audio podcast. And so for me, when I'm going into somebody's ear, like that has to be quality. And on the rarest occasions, if there's somebody that I really, really like, I'll try to power through a bad quality show. But it really makes a difference. So for me, making sure that quality is there is really important. And when I listen to shows and my guests might not have the best quality, sometimes for me, it's a little cringe worthy as the listener on the back end of things, because I'm always thinking about that user experience or listener experience.
Yeah. And that's a tough one because you can't always control the guest and you can prepare them as much as you can, but ultimately it's a gamble. So
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But your audio quality is great. I was going to say, like, it helps when I have people on, and it's nice that I have podcasters on the show because they all have really great quality of everything. So makes it easy for me. So next one, what was the biggest lesson in your podcast journey that you've encountered?
Okay. This is a good one. I just thought of this. Don't expect your guests it's not your guest's job to promote your show. And you hope that they will, but you have to you have to bring people on for the right reasons because they're a good fit and whatever your reasoning is. And the hope is that, and I know when I'm a guest on your show, I'm going to share it because I'm proud of it. And I also want to promote you and let my listeners know about you. Yeah. But not everybody shares that sentiment. And I used to get disappointed when I would have a guest on and they wouldn't share my show. Like I would take that very personally. And I kind of let that go. I was like, that's just a waste of energy. So we always encourage them. We promote it in our follow-up. Again, we have workflow processes for everything. And so after we have a guest on, once it drops, we give them assets, make it super easy. We'll even add them as a collaborator. But if they don't do it or their team doesn't do it, it's, I just, again, don't take that personally anymore. Yeah.
And you never know what's going on in their life too. I mean, sometimes they just don't have the time because it does take time. I mean, it's marketing basically. Sure. But I have to say the ones that do share, it's like, I always send them like an extra thank you. This is amazing. So I guess that gratitude, I agree with you. Just switch it into gratitude and let go of the expectation.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, finally, if money or time were not a factor, if you had a closet that was not very full, a time closet, what would be next for your podcast?
Okay. So we're testing this new thing now. And so I'm going to actually use your platform to just put it out there for anybody. Maybe you can include a link in the show notes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've always wanted to have like a call-in show. And so I was from the longest time, because I feel like, especially when it comes to clutter and organization, like people have like simple questions that I want to be able to answer. And so we're testing out this new segment. And at the time of recording, it hasn't even we haven't even launched it yet, but we're just in the information gathering stage. It's called Ask an Expert. And so it's a 20-minute spot and we have a special dedicated link and it's going out to anybody. Like you don't have to be a podcaster, everyday people. It could be anybody that has a question about anything related to clutter organization. It could be about podcasting, anything that you want to ask me. Yeah. And we hop on a Zoom call. So you fill out this like little questionnaire intake, like, what do you want to know? What's your question? And then we record it. And if you want to change your name, we can blur it out so that if you want to be anonymous. And then we're going to do an Ask an Expert segment on the show so that we're going to, because I feel like when most people have a question, you're not the only one that has that question. Mm-mm. So if somebody else has it, if you have it, somebody else or hundreds of other people have it too. Mm-hmm. So we want to start making it a little bit more interactive with everyday people. And so that's kind of what the next thing is. And I'm not sure how it's going to play out in real time, but that's our next exciting thing that we have on the horizon.
Well, that is super exciting. I think it's going to be a hit and it's just nice to see, like, again, I'm just so like interested in your evolution of how you've changed over this time, and like the fact that you've gone so far in this journey. It's allowed you to think about these things like, hey, what can we do next? This like, and actually do something that's fun. That's, you know, takes you back to the days of like radio call-in shows and things that we used to listen to as kids. I mean, it's fun, it's awesome, and it's a whole different level of engagement with your audience, with your listeners, or maybe even somebody that just stumbled into it and was like, hey, this is a great way for me to get some tips and get right to the expert. Oh, well, Laurie, this has been so great. And I feel like I could go on and on about all the new things that you have planned, but we're excited for this new segment that you're bringing in, and we will watch this space for it and just encouraging you on this new adventure. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on, sharing, being an open book, and just letting everyone know all your best tips for podcasting.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for putting this out there in the world. Podcasting, it's a saturated space. It's a fun space, and there's plenty of room for people, and finding your niche is, like, there's plenty of room for people in the sandbox. And I just love talking about this topic. And again, I do tend to geek and nerd out about all the workflow and strategy. So if anybody's out there and listening and wants to talk more about it, I can do it all day. So feel free to reach out to me.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next time.